Have you read this book? Thinking about reading this book? Well, I read this book, and here is my spoiler-free review. Hopefully, it will convince you to read it. Or maybe you like happiness, and you won't. Book Yaps with Ash. Let me premise by saying that this was always going to be a 5-star review for me. When this book was announced last June, it was a 5-star review for me. Now, you might call that bias, but I call it projection. Bottom line is, it was going to take a lot for me not to love this book. It was going to take a lot for me not to rate it 5 stars. However, I actually feel like it's a 6-star book. So, my projection was a bit off. It exceeded my expectations. Now, the word love, it's an interesting word. Because did I love reading this book? I don't know. This book ripped my heart out, then put my heart in the driveway, got in the car, reversed over it, put the car back in drive, drove back over my heart, and that was just the first half of the book. The second half took my whole body, heart included, sewed it back in, buried me alive while I was screaming. To put it another way, I have a literal hernia, and reading this book hurt me more. So yeah, good question. Did I love this book? I guess yes, because it achieved what it set out to. It hurt, it evoked anger, and told another story on power and resistance that needs to be told. It gave you characters you couldn't help but adore, and then it destroyed them. These aren't spoilers. These are things that you know and expect to receive from this book, having already known Haymitch as an adult who's not doing well. And the reasons are in here. So this book's excellent for 2 reasons. The first one, as a standalone, if we want to take it out from the series, forget that it's a prequel for a moment. It's just really incredibly written. There's some insanely good lines in here. The prose is just filled with resistance and anger, and overall, the pacing was great. The story kept you on your toes. Things were not predictable in any way, shape, or form. It truly is a brutal, tragic, devastating story. From the first chapter, there are horrible things that happen. They continue throughout the book, and they never really feel far-fetched because of the world that was built around this book. Sure, it feels like way too much for one 16-year-old boy to handle. However, in the context of this horrible world that Suzanne Collins has built, it never feels far-fetched. It makes perfect sense that all of these things would happen to Haymitch, one after the other. So while the book will make you angry and maybe cry, and overall just hurt, that's the point. That's what makes it so good, is that it evoked these very strong feelings in you. Another thing is that so much of this story, so many quotes can be directly related to things going on in our awesome, well-functioning society right now. There's the othering that's being done by people in power, the control of the wealth, the propaganda, the overall anger, and helplessness. It's all very relatable. It's just told in a different way. Taking into account that this is a prequel, the second prequel to a trilogy series, and digesting it that way, it is also incredibly well done. I feel like it was kind of a missing piece to the series. It perfectly connected to the main trilogy, but also to the first prequel in many ways. You get a full, incredibly detailed account of why Haymitch was the way he was when you first meet him at the 74th Hunger Games. You totally understand why he's a drunk and in solitude and miserable by the end of this book. Honestly, you understand by the end of the first chapter, but it just gets worse. You also get to learn about a lot more characters than just Haymitch. There's President Snow, and you really get to see the effect that Lucy Gray is still having on him 40 years later. God, get over it, buddy. And on top of that, you get some backstory from so many other characters that you may not have expected to see in this story. And being a super fan of the trilogy, it's exciting, but it's also devastating. You're like, oh, hell yeah, that person's in this story. Oh, hell no, that sucks. Fuck you, Snow. Honestly, as I was reading this, It was very hard to believe that this wasn't written along with the main trilogy. Everything in it just made so much sense that it's clear that Suzanne Collins at least did some sort of thinking on these characters and their stories, while maybe not putting them into books until now. Everything just makes perfect sense. Everything is aligned on a timeline, and it just feels like these are real people, and that we're getting their historical account because of how well this fits into the main storyline. And then on top of all the character development you get, there's tons of Easter eggs. It kind of feels like no line is wasted in this book. Everything means something, whether it is alluding to something that happened in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes or something that's going to happen in the main trilogy. Everything means something, and there are probably things that I didn't even catch having not read the main trilogy since I was like 13, but it just feels so well thought out, so well done. So I'll die on the hill that The Hunger Games is the most impactful book series of our generation. No other book or series had such widespread success while also having a really intense and important message to it. I will wait here while you name one. See, and the thing is you can't. So, that's proof. But anyways, this is a series that spans 17 years and is still getting crazy hype. Like, I am on the book side of the internet. I follow book people. I see lots of book content, and I am seeing people who don't post book content post about reading this. Everybody is reading this, and that is a testament to how well this series has held up for the past almost 20 years. And while there is a craze for it, I think that it's a weird thing to be excited for something that is so devastating and so brutal. But I think that creating a story that's so engaging, that is so accepted by the masses, but then also has a really important message about power throughout the whole series is a huge accomplishment, because really, in most cases, you can have one or the other. You can have a very popular series that it gets eaten up but is kind of trash. You can have books that have really important messaging to them, but people just kind of stray away from them because they feel like it's forced learning, or they just want to read something fun. But this series really meets you in the middle. It's accepted widely by the masses. Everybody wants to read it. Everybody wants to talk about it. And it's teaching you about power dynamics and how impactful they can be and how harmful they can be. And while I'm a bit regretful for saying, oh, fucks no, like, I want to hear Haymitch's story. Why don't you write Haymitch's story, Suzanne? Well, she did, and she said, fine, here you go. Here's Haymitch's story. I hope you're happy. I'm glad that she did. I'm glad to be experiencing this world again, regardless of how awful it is. It's just great writing. It's just really great storytelling, world building, character development, pacing. I feel like it's perfect. I won't accept any criticism on it. I won't. I think anybody who's rating this book low needs to go away. Overall, I just feel like I got way more than what I expected out of this book. I was hooked from the beginning. It had me gripped till the end. It had me screaming into it. I had to take breaks from reading it because of how intense it was. And while all of those emotions are negative in a way, I'm glad to have read it. I won't say it was an enjoyable experience, but it also, in a way, was. And that's confusing. But yeah, this one was great. I am in pain. I'm angry. I'm sad, devastated, all of those fun words. All thanks to this lovely piece of fiction, this 400-page attack on my mental health. So all that being said, here you go, Suzanne. Here's your 6 out of 5-star review. I hope you're happy. I'm miserable, but also ecstatic, and that's confusing. So here's your goddamn review, and thank you so much for writing this and for having something to say. If you have more things to say in the future, I will read them, but just know that it will probably destroy me. If I convinced you to read this book, I would suggest call your therapist first, because I don't feel like this this was convincing, I feel like you should want to run the other way. And if I didn't convince you to read this book, I don't feel good about that either. But that's all I got. I'm just a simple guy. Well, thanks for joining me on this special edition episode of Book Yaps with Ash. We'll see you next time when I do my March reads. That'll be soon. Bye.